Welcome, another day. Well, you know us, we are Android Developer Group. Welcome again. We have Ataul today, who's going to talk about accessibility. This is the hashtag for the event, so you are free to post some tweets or whatever. We are also thinking about that using only these letters because maybe it's too much. But okay, it's free. Well, thanks to Irene, Rodriguez, Andres to manage the place and the event. And well, they are hiring another time. So feel free to talk with Andres if you are searching something to work. So, well, without getting more, we have Raúl. And
working.
Hello everyone. Cool. So my name is Ataul. Thanks for having me. Firstly, can I just ask if anyone here is familiar with accessibility on Android? Anyone super unfamiliar with it? I've never heard of it, don't care about it. Sky. iOS developer, you can tell. So this talk is actually aimed for people that are either have been exposed to the best practices for accessibility or who know nothing about it, Pascal. And they're now looking for more of a structured approach. So they've seen tips and tricks, they've seen it in isolation used in trivial apps, but now they're looking for a non-trivial example, how they can implement it or migrate their current app, such that they're supporting as many users as possible. I've been doing accessibility since 2015, so I started with the Times and Sunday Times, a newspaper in the UK, then moving on to Channel 4, one of our major broadcasters. It was during this time that I did a lot of research, did lots of things wrong, but we managed to do some user testing and I got lots of feedback as well. And it's great because in the last few years, especially from 2016, there's been lots of meetup organisers like BADG and conference committees that have been accepting talks about accessibility. So without these people and this sort of willingness to hear these ideas and concepts that potentially aren't very mainstream, we wouldn't have as many people now teaching and producing teaching content, and also people who are now aware of it. And with the number of people who have been introduced to it, who are now starting to produce teaching content, who are giving talks or writing blog posts, introducing it to their teams, it's great because you get one person out of a company who manages to champion the cause of accessibility for the whole team, which is great, but it's not sustainable. Like, you can't have just one person relying on one person to do this very one important task, because it needs the whole team input, it needs the whole team approval, it needs their understanding, so that if that one person is away or gets hit by a bus, there's someone to continue the work. And I think we've potentially been moving too quickly, so you get the same sorts of, well, in the context of individual talks or blog posts, we've been moving too quickly, so you get bombarded with all these facts and information about you should do this, you should do that, but there's no sort of real context in which to apply these changes. So you get these snippets of information, but kind of overwhelmed, you're not sure what to do. And people walk away then from these talks understanding that accessibility is a good thing to do, but they don't know where to start. So I asked the community, what do they need? What is stopping them from implementing the things that they're learning in their apps? What's stopping them from taking it back to their product owners, their designers, and encouraging everyone on the team to get involved? And I got varied responses. So I got some responses I was surprised with. So there were people who were asking me questions and guidance about how to integrate accessibility checks in their CI. I'm like, wow, I didn't expect these sorts of things. Like, there's definitely things you can do with lip checks, expressio tests. They're asking me, how can you convince the business to invest in it? It takes time, it takes money for sure. How can you get permission to do it? But the majority of people were asking me questions about how do you get started. Like, it's a big thing to undertake. It's big in the same way that migrating from RX Java 1 to RX Java 2 is big, but it's not a finite task in and of itself. With accessibility, it's something that you'll do. You're going to do it slowly and gradually, and you have to maintain it over time. It's not like suddenly the compiler is going to complain because you've broken the experience for a user or a set of users. So people are asking for videos and guides on how to do things or how to move forward. They're asking for non-trivial examples again. And I think this year my goal is to provide some of that. So I want to give people the tools and the information and knowledge they need to be able to move forward in a focused, direct way, such that they can apply the tips and tricks that they've learned in a linear fashion with the feeling that they're moving forward and not just haphazardly going around doing stuff. My 15-minute goal, because I don't have a year, or 20-minute, is to give you an understanding of two important parts of accessibility. So if you're going to go away tomorrow and start doing something, these are the two things I think are the most important and potentially are the easiest things to tackle, which is handy. But first, let's start with what accessibility is, because I've said the word probably 15 times and I haven't explained what it is. Quite a few people put their hands up and said that they've heard of accessibility. I want those people to forget everything that they know about accessibility. Not because what you know isn't correct, probably is correct, but it's quite a wide concept, and I think it's easier for us to approach it together with a shared understanding. In terms of mobile apps or digital products in general, there's two things that every app does. One, they present information to the user, or they facilitate the conveyance of information from the product to the user. And two, they provide affordances for interactions between the user and the device. So, for example, pressing a button to fulfill some sort of goal. And these are the only two things that apps do. They give information, like they provide input and they provide output. And that's all accessibility is. It's the facilitation of these two things. So our job as developers, designers, product owners, testers, whatever, is to facilitate this for as many people as possible. And that as many people as possible is what accessibility is. There was a request for non-trivial examples, so let's use YouTube. So it's not a trivial app, it's something that millions and millions of people use every day. There's lots of different components. A lot of them we'll see and use every day, like cycle views and standard view groups. There's non-standard components, like the video player, for example. They've got different requirements such that there's more avenues for conveying information. So it's a good place to start if you want to convince people that it's not a pipe dream, that it's possible to do, and it's if you've got a good process that you can start doing it today. YouTube is not being used because it's a bad example, it's being used because it's a good example. Like we're going to highlight the things that it does really well, and we'll also consider things that we might do differently or consider different approaches that could have been taken. And the idea is to fill in the gaps. So we're going to try and have a checklist at the end of this that you can take away and say, okay, I need to do this, this, and this. It's going to take me X weeks, and it's going to cost me Y money, depending on how much it costs. There's two things that, there's one thing that text needs to be, and that's readable. So if you can't read the text, it's useless. And our job, again, is to facilitate this goal for as many users as possible. One of the most difficult things for us to do as developers, especially on small devices, is design and implement layouts. Design and implement layouts that respond well to different string lengths. So we can't tell runtime, like how long a piece, or at design time, sorry, how long a piece of string will be. That's what the ribbon thing as well. A lot of these pictures are really tenuous, but there is a link somewhere sometimes. We can't tell at design time, even for because a lot of it comes from remote, like from the API. Even for the strings and stuff that we do know at build time, so the string that we package inside the app, we can't guarantee that it's going to be the same length. You can't say this is going to be 3 lines long because different translations will change the length of the strings, different phone dimensions or screen dimensions will squash things. Different text and different content interplay with each other is going to affect the layouts as well. So there's 3 ways we can address this. One is create a fully responsive layout. And this isn't going to be new to anyone, which is a good thing, hopefully. Like, everyone will have heard of every Android developer will have heard of the dimension wrap content. See? That's all it is. That's what a fully responsive layout does. Like, you're not constraining in both dimensions such that if there's too much text, you don't have to cut the text off. The other way is to cut the text off. That is a strategy to employ. Usually we'll ellipsize the end, so we'll put the 3 dots at the end. It's not the best way in all cases, but we'll see it in action. And also there's a combination of the two. So you could potentially, if you've got a long string and you know there's a good place to break it, you can show the primary part of it and have that responsive. And then with some user interaction, you can display the full content. And YouTube does all 3 of these. So you can see on the home screen, we've got a list of suggested videos. Each item is full width, but the height is completely unconstrained. The user can navigate vertically. This one's not a GIF, so it's fine. But just imagine you're navigating through the feed as you're scrolling. And because the height is unconstrained, it means that the text can be as long as it wants to be. On another screen, though, you can have fixed content. So this happens when your designers or your product owners say, we want to display as much as possible, we want to use as much screen real estate as possible, so we need to make sure that things are limited in the space so that we can fit more things on the screen. When that happens, you've got fixed dimensions which can constrain how much you can fit inside. And then you get ellipsized text. But this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like, these ellipses, ellipsized texts can function as a call to action. So in this case, the video title is a primary piece of information. The user's going to see that, and understand that if they click on the text, they're going to be taken to somewhere where they can see the full text. At that point on that screen, the video title is not the primary information anymore, it's secondary to the video, but there's always a way to see the full content. And finally, you've got the third option where the combination. So I don't know how many people are uploaders on YouTube, or they follow, subscribe to many channels. But a lot of the video uploaders are very verbose in the descriptions, like they put links, lines upon lines of text. YouTube just displays the title now. If you want to see the description, you can click on the title, and it will expand the entire view and show the description underneath. Not only does it do this, but it also shows some of the information in an expanded form. So you've got the 4.9 million subscribers in more detail, so you can see exactly how many subscribers you've got. But again, you've got the ellipsized text. In this case, it doesn't matter too much. People can guess what it means or guess what the purpose is. Instead, maybe the subscriber could have just been wrapped content underneath. The good thing is, if you can handle that varying text length, then you're in a good stage for the next part. So this is handling scaling text or different font sizes for the user. So has anyone tried changing the font size on their own device? Yeah. So you'll know that it's not unbounded. you've got 4 sizes you can set the text to. You can set to small, normal, large, and huge, depending on which section you're in. It might say larger. And these scaling factors are known since Android 1.0. So small corresponds to 0.8 times the standard text size. 1 is 1. And then you've got huge and large, which is largest, I think, goes up to 1.3 times. So when you're designing and testing the different extremes for these, you can limit your testing to just testing the smallest case and the largest case, which is going to be 1.3 times your expected font size. One of the first things we learn as developers is to use SPs, so scale dependent pixels instead of DPs, and this facilitates this automatic transition from whenever the user changes their font scale. This dimension can be used and scaled up automatically without us having to worry about it. This can be difficult to test. Not difficult, but tedious to test. So we wrote an espresso test rule that allows you to change the font size programmatically. So in combination with something like a screenshot testing rule, you can take a screenshot of all of your screens at varying font scales, and then you can do the manual check and say, oh, this one's crap, or this one's broken, or this one's fine. The way it works is that you'll most likely be familiar with activity test rules like this, where you're testing a particular screen. The rule that we wrote wraps around the activity test rule. So you can use JUnit rule chains that can wrap around other rules and then affect the order in which they run. So in this case, where the font scale rule is wrapping around the activity test rule, the font rule can decide when the activity stuff gets run. So in this case, it runs the test, which starts the test. The font scale changes. Then the font scale one will delegate to the activity rule, such that the activity starts. The actual test that was running executes. The activity tears down, and then the font scale will reset to the original value so it gets in a good place for the next set of tests. And the last part of making your text readable is choosing colors considerately. So make sure you're not conveying information using only colors. For some users with certain types of colorblindness, like protanopia, they won't be able to distinguish reds from blacks. This is on the YouTube app, so at the moment, these users can't tell which the selected tab is. In these cases, you can provide an alternative way of conveying information, so you can embolden the selected tab, so that there's multiple ways, everyone's covered, and it doesn't detract from the original use case, which is identifying which is the selected tab. And the other part of being color considerate is choosing colors which have high enough contrast to be read. It seems obvious, so it's not always straightforward. The color contrast is the difference between two colors' luminosity, and it needs to be a certain value. There's some equation you can use to figure it out. We started writing a test rule, but it's difficult to use in practice because it's difficult to pick out individual colors and understand what's the real thing. So this is something that you need to decide with your designers. It's not just necessarily for text on just plain backgrounds. If you've got images or videos, like in this case, you can display gradients or scrims as YouTube does. So we've had these three things that we've talked about that we can improve and check in our apps today. So one is building responsive containers for our text. 2 is making sure that our text scales properly with the user settings. And 3 is making sure we choose nice colors. A structured guide to accessibility would be kind of rubbish if we don't mention accessibility services. Is anyone familiar with accessibility services? Has anyone heard of an accessibility service called back. Yeah. So this is probably the most famous one. An accessibility service is it's a software implementation of an assistive technology. So it sits in the layer between your. It has elevated permissions, so it's like its own app, and it provides the user a way to do the two things I talked about at the beginning, which is one, helps them read the information or consume the information from the app, and two, it helps the user convey whatever interactions they want to back towards the app. So TalkBack, interactions, is for blind users or vision impaired users. In this case, the way it helps users output is it's a screen reader. So for blind users, you can't read from the screen directly, it will read things aloud. It helps users interact with the app as well using gestures. You can use double taps, you can use swipes, all sorts. As app developers, we don't need to do much to make our apps support these services. We just need to expose the right level of information for these services such that they can use it to work for the user. With TalkBack, so this is our this is how TalkBack will look if you can see it, if we're using TalkBack. So the way it works is there's this thing called accessibility focus. It's similar to input focus, where with a keyboard you might have input focus on edit text, so that you can direct key events to a certain view. But accessibility focus highlights a particular view or a view group, and it indicates which view the accessibility service will direct interactions to and read information from. So TalkBack highlights this accessibility focus with the screen rectangle. If you're on Jelly Bean, you'll see a yellow rectangle, and the way the user navigates is linearly. So they'll swipe right, and each swipe right, the screen rectangle is going to go to the next view, the next view, the next view, in the same order as they are defined in your hierarchy. If they want to select a view, they need to double tap anywhere on the screen, and it will send a click event to whichever view has the accessibility focus. So say here it's got the accessibility focus, if I double tap here, it's still going to send the click event to the one that's highlighted. When I was collecting feedback, someone asked what makes a good content description. So what is a content description? Content description is something that's used by accessibility services to describe views. TalkBack uses this content description directly, where the screen reading service will read aloud the view that is displayed that has accessibility focus. And my answer to them was make sure it just describes the view and nothing else. So it shouldn't include any actions that the view is going to have. We used to, or Samsung used to ask us to say the action as well. So say, for example, on the cast icon, Samsung would ask us to say cast button, double tap to double tap to cast. They'd ask us to specify that it's a button as well to indicate that it's clickable. Now we have usage hints. The usage hints are additional metadata that is used primarily by TalkBack, or as far as I'm aware, only by TalkBack. And it describes how a view can be used, what actions are available on a particular view. If a view has a click listener, like any of these, when the view has accessibility focus, TalkBack will read aloud the content description, it'll wait a few seconds, and then it'll read out the actions that are available. It'll say double tap to activate, or if it's got a long click listener, it'll say double tap and hold to long press, which doesn't make much sense to me. But the good thing is, since Lollipop, we've got these usage hints which we can now customize. So with these customizations, we can say something that better describes its purpose. When we select the cast icon, we can just say cast button, we can still say button, or cast action, and then the usage hint will be something like cast content or connect to Chromecast, for example. And instead of saying double tap to activate, we'll say double tap to cast content. It's not just individual views that need content descriptions. View groups as well. So by default, if you've got a view group that's not that contains other informational views like text views or clickable or focusable items. Talkback can concatenate altogether the individual ones for you. In this case, there's quite a few pieces of information. You've got the avatar from the user, you've got the comments, you've got how long ago it was, you've got the thumbs up and thumbs down to indicate how popular this comment is. Instead of surfacing all of this information to the user, you can set an explicit content description on the view group. And this is where products come in and design come in, because they're the ones that can decide what information is pertinent to the user. So maybe the likes and dislikes aren't super important. Maybe it's better for them just to read just the comment and who wrote it, because it's faster. You want to keep the information open to a minimum. And you can do that just using set content description. With the usage hints, they appear at the bottom. How do you set them? So you can use an accessibility delegate. Accessibility delegates work in the same way that they would without the delegate on the view, where you could override, you used to be able to, or you can still override methods on view or view group. Instead of doing this, you can set the delegates which allow you to reuse and test them separately. And the way you do it is you would specify the action that you're trying to specify the label for, and specify the label that you're replacing. So in the case of one of the video items, you can say, instead of saying the default clip, which would be activate, you can say play video. If you're using Android KTX, the new Kotlin extension library from Google, yeah. I mean, there's lots of Ks and Xs now. But there's one library that has this extension in it now. It's called set usage hint. You just specify either the character sequence or the resource, and it will do this thing for you. And that's pretty much it. If you want a base level of support for these users, like if you want to provide your content descriptions and you want to provide your usage hints, but we don't want a base level. We want a good level of experience for our users. We discussed before that the users navigate linearly. So as they're swiping right, it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Imagine if you had a sliding tab strip. So, you know, on the Android Play Store, the Google Play Store, it's like three or four different tab strips now. If the user has to navigate linearly, to get through to like the third level of content, they have to go through all of the tab strips. Instead, what we can do is check if an accessibility service is running, like TalkBack, and instead of showing all of the actions or all of the tabs, we can provide a different UI. So on the left-hand side, instead of providing the actions for going to the channel, for example, or adding to a playlist or sharing, etc., we expose these as a set of actions for each individual view. So this means that as they're navigating through the list, it only takes one swipe action to get through to the next item. If the user wants to interact with it, they double tap on it, it brings out this object dialog or any sort of dialog that you want, and then they've got the list of actions. How do you do this? In a similar way, you use the accessibility delegates. You need to do the first part as well, where you indicate the action, but then you also need to say what happens when you perform this accessibility action. What happens when the user clicks on it? Then you need to do the callback to perform the action. But is there an easier way? Yes. Yes, there is. So we wrote another part of our library, accessibility tools, which allows developers to specify these actions in a resource, in a menu resource. So this is something that you'd be familiar with already. If you were using context menus or action menus, like this is inflated in much the same way. So you provide this menu where the items need to have an ID and a title. You inflate it using this menu inflator, and then you can create an accessibility delegate from this menu, and then you can just set it on the view. Finally, this isn't the only thing we can do. We don't have to just be limited with the same actions that all users are provided with. So it's not just making the actions that we already have in our app available to the users, but how about providing an alternative of what it is for other users? So here on the video screen for YouTube, we've got the video overlay which comes up. If you've got TalkBack turned on, or if you've got any accessibility service turned on, you get this one instead. This is because if you're using TalkBack or Switch Access, it's really difficult to use the seek bar. But it's not so difficult to use the rewind and forward 10 seconds. Times controls annoying and hard to use as well. So on the left-hand side, the overlay disappears after a few seconds. On the right-hand side, it comes up immediately when you first open the app, and it stays there forever until you explicitly dismiss. If you're blind, you're not going to care that there's an overlay on the screen. Okay. So those are the two things I want to say. It sounded like a lot more than two things, but it's just two things. The first was text. Make sure that text is readable, because that's what it's good for. Make sure it's got you're creating fully responsive layouts. Make sure that your text scales with the font scale setting. Make sure that the text colors that you use are explicit and have enough contrast ratio and are considerate for colorblind users. The second part was exposing the right level of information for TalkBack users. So concatenating views with multiple inline actions into single action items using the actions menu, setting content descriptions, and setting user shifts. So, big things, but compressed into two. And what's next? So the next thing I'm working on is a blog post about accessibility services, like how to actually create one. So I'll get these questions like, oh, I need to make my app accessible, but I don't know how to make an accessibility service. And for too long different readers, you don't need to make an accessibility service. Probably no one will in this room. Like, I tried doing it, it was horrible. It didn't work for what I wanted to do, but you'll see posts if you read it. Those are the things that you can start with. Those are the things that you can take tomorrow and start thinking about. But for me, those are the most important things: text and setting the descriptions